Welcome to Chautauqua People. My guest today is Jane Cleaver Becker, a long-term Chautauquan who has truly helped many people in this community. Jane was born in Philadelphia, grew up in suburban Cleveland, graduated from Kent State and did graduate work at Indiana University and Case Western Reserve. She is certified master graduate executive coach. She came to Chautauqua from South Bend, Indiana, where she had been head of the County Department for Employment and Youth. She had spent 22 years working on employment training and continues consulting in the area. She has served as chair of the Linhart Group, a software development organization. Afterwards, she headed up an integrated development organization which had 14 state governments as customers. While she enjoyed the work, it involved too much travel. She still does such work, but with less travel. Jane's volunteer efforts have been extensive. She created Riverside Child Development Center and another organization heavily involved in research and planning for human services, measuring outcomes and annual reporting of accomplishments. She's heavily involved in a coalition of Chautauqua women and girls and the Dibbert Foundation. Jane, what are some of the issues which gave rise to formation of the coalition?
Well, about 5 years ago, we conducted a study on the status of women and girls in this county, which was funded through the Dibbert Foundation. And what we found is that as an upstate rural county, we face many challenges, not unlike other counties and other states, but we do have our challenges. And we focused particularly on women, partly because we knew that when you help a woman, you also help her family and you help the community. And we also knew that our women in this county were facing significant challenge. So part of our study revealed that the teenage pregnancy in this county, the rate, is higher than the national average, higher than the state average, and it continues to grow. During the Great Recession, 08, 09, pregnancy rates dropped significantly, as they tend to do around economic issues. But we found in this county that wasn't true, and they continue to grow. That's a major issue. About a third of our children in Chautauqua County are living in poverty, and about a fifth of our women are living in poverty. And there aren't a lot of economic opportunities for them here, and that affects your entire outlook. You know, do you invest in yourself? Do you go into training if you aren't sure there's going to be a job waiting for you? So we conducted a study and we started to look at each of these areas. We also looked at issues that affect women who are not living in poverty. Just being a woman, what are the issues that we face? And we identified a long list of things, including managing finances for a lifetime, being responsible for your own financial future, things around handling multiple responsibilities, dealing with nutrition, not only for yourself, but also your family. How do you conduct? So the issues that we brought forth fell into kind of two big pots, one being women living in poverty and their children, and the other having to do with women in general in the county.
Now, how many women are currently involved in the coalition?
We have about 300 women. We have kind of two areas of focus. One is the southern Chautauqua County area, where we've been primarily serving women in the Jamestown area. And in the north part of the county, we have a coalition steering committee there that's made up of women from Dunkirk and Fredonia, and we're running separate programs up in that area.
Right. Are the programs vastly different, or just?
They actually have taken on a little different character. One of the great advantages when you have a totally volunteer program where there is no source of exterior funding, there are no guidelines, there's no eligibility criteria. We were free to create a program that we really thought reflected the needs of the people in that community. So South County, we began working with women in poverty and their children. And we created what we call a coaching program, women-to-women coaching. And the focus has been on providing support to them, providing guidance where they need it, where they want it, but basically being a support to them as they make decisions about the future for themselves and their children. North County, we work very closely with the state university there, SUNY Fredonia. And initially, some of the faculty and staff that were a part of our steering committee there had identified women who are attending college, either our community college, the Jamestown Community College has a North County campus, or SUNY Fredonia, that there are women who are attending school but are at risk. And that's kind of generally defined by faculty or staff. But somebody who's at risk perhaps of dropping out. What we see in this county, and frankly I think it's common across the country, you have an awful lot of people who start school, and if they have challenges in their life, they may start college, but they don't necessarily complete. And they may walk away from that experience with a student loan, but they have no credential. They have nothing that came out of that for them. So providing support to students who have started their educational career is a good place for us to be. So North County, it is a coaching program, but it is coaching women who are already in school.
Mm-hmm. And South County less likely to be in school.
Correct. More likely to be working part-time jobs, sometimes several jobs. Some of them are working on English as a second language, maybe working on a high school diploma or a GED. So they tend to be have a longer trend for them to become self-sustaining.
Right. I taught for 12 years in a community college. We lost lots of students, and that matter of keeping them in track was so essential. And that's in a county with a strong economy and high employment prospects. Very difficult, and very important. So many community college students in particular are first generation college,
right,
and their families are not necessarily supportive of higher education.
Yeah.
So anything we can do to keep those students on track is immensely beneficial.
I think that is what we see here too. Community colleges are an easy access point. People can readily get into those programs, but I think it puts a real burden on the community colleges to keep the students in, but also to make sure that whatever training they're getting, in fact, is meeting the needs of our local employers. Chances are very great that someone who is completing a 1-year certificate, a 2-year associate degree, is not moving somewhere else for an employment opportunity. Chances are very good they're going to stay in our county. And I think it's essential that both our 4-year but also our 2-year colleges really focus on what are those occupational skills in the local area, and how do we support the development of soft skills. So some of it has to do with content. If you want to be an accountant, you have to learn, accounting information.
Right.
But you also have to learn to show up on time. You have to know how to work as a member of a team. You have to be able to communicate with your professor and other students appropriately. And I think that our colleges need to focus on both the technical skills that are required and the soft skills.
Right. Now let's look nitpicky question here. One of the items we talked about was identifying at-risk women at JCC or Fredonia. Mm-hmm. And how do we identify them before they terminate or drop out?
Right. Well, our way of going about that is through faculty and staff. We've had a wonderful relationship with the Career Development and Guidance program at SUNY. So students that are coming in asking for help, identifying themselves as needing to look for work while they're still going to school. There are some red flags that come up in a career center, but it also comes up in the classroom. I think that the teachers can see, the professors can see someone who's not attending regularly, or their homework isn't quite what it should be. Maybe they're struggling before the test. And we've really looked to faculty and staff to be the ones to catch those red flags early on. And then for us to be able to provide another woman who can be supportive, can ask good questions, can help give support to this woman as she's struggling her way through school.
I found in my community college days in teaching non-conventional students in night classes, also at Fort Bragg, that if I look at the students who didn't show, and I called them all up after 2 nights, I could generally bring about half of them back into class, just by the human interest. And those who didn't call almost always went away. So I hope your program puts some pressure or points to the importance it is of following these students immediately and not letting them slip.
Right.
Now, can you tell me about the coaching experience? And I understand we're using the word coach and not mentor. Probably explain the difference, and then tell me a little bit about how you select these people and train them.
Yeah. Well, we've been so fortunate. We've held a series of events over the last 4 years and have brought in, as I said, up to 300 women have participated in one event or another. And basically we do our recruiting through that group. So they have come together around women's issues. And what we ask of them is that they give up to an hour each week for a year to be connected with one of the women that are ready to be coached. And initially we thought that would be an hour of face-to-face for 52 weeks. What we found is that especially women in poverty, their lives are very, very busy. Most of them are working, often working more than one little part-time job. Each of their children have things that need to be done, whether that's doctors or it's going to a school and talking to a counselor or a teacher there. They have a lot going on in their life, and if they're eligible for some public assistance, that has a whole long line of appointments and responsibilities. And what we really found is that every week probably wasn't going to be realistic for them. But what is the wonderful technology of texting and calls. So a significant portion, as we learned over our piloting of this project, a lot of the connection is through technology. And to be honest, that's what young people like to do anyway.
That's right.
You know, our children, even our grandchildren, that's the way they love to connect. So while it may be, and we do have some coaching pairs that do meet face-to-face most of the time, it's not a requirement. It's whatever works for the two of them. So there is this ongoing connection between them. And in a coaching environment, the individual being coached sets the agenda. It's up for them to bring things to the table. And it can come out of a simple question as, how was your week? What went well? What didn't go well? The coach is trained to ask good questions, not to solve problems, not to tell someone what to do. It is very much peer-to-peer, with total respect for the woman that is being coached. I heard a great quote today at a lecture at Chautauqua that had to do with respect for the individual. And that's really what this is about. Who would you not love if you knew their story? And that's part of what we're getting at, is knowing that story. And maybe the woman that we're working with has made some mistakes in her life. Whether she feels that way or not is not material, but she's in a spot she probably really doesn't want to be there. And it's up to us to really understand that story and let her decide where she wants to go. So unlike in some other programs where you really are playing the role of guiding someone and solving their problems and kind of telling them, well, have you done this? You need to do this. Those words would never come from one of our coaches.
So it's not a directive program.
It is not directive, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me any more questions you might ask of the person being coached?
Well, it depends on where they are, okay, in their continuum. And Part of what we hope we can offer is ideas and a vision about a different kind of life. So one of the questions might be, when are you at your best? When are you the happiest? When are you the most comfortable? When are you at your best? And then, what gets in the way? How do you get derailed from that? Is it exterior, environmental kind of things, or is it something that kind of triggers for you? Particularly if we're working with someone who has a job, and maybe they're having a problem with a boss. The simple question of, when does that work? When you're talking to that person, when is it good?
Mm-hmm.
And then, when does it get derailed? So we try to prompt questions that has the woman thinking about her circumstances in an aspirational way.
Mm-hmm.
What is your best self? I mean, ultimately, and you not asking that question directly,
Right.
but that's the path we're on. How can we help you be your best self? Be that in the circumstances that you are right now, or are there future steps? Most of the women, we do ask that the women who are going to be coached to apply for the program. They are not required to go to this. Nobody's told them they had to do this.
Right.
It's something that they want to be involved in. And part of what we ask them is, do you have goals? Are there some things that you would like to accomplish? And most of the time, they're pretty immediate kinds of things, like, I need to get a driver's license. I would like to finish English as a second language. I would like to earn more money in the job that I currently have. So we ask them to provide us with some of their goals. And again, most of those are pretty immediate things. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy,
Right.
we're at the base of clothing and house, a roof over my head and enough food for my children, those kinds of things. And what we hope over time that we can do is to help that woman think about the future in a bigger, more opportunities, kind of open the doors a little bit for her, and help her to see all the potential that she has that she may not be focused on because she's just trying to get through tomorrow.
So if I hear you correctly, the goals are generally presented are not that distant.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be very immediate.
Yes.
Is a challenge of the coach to get them to think about the longer term goals and perhaps a strategy to achieve them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. How to kind of open up her eyes to other opportunities. And you can understand that if somebody really is in a difficult housing situation, there may be other people in their life, there may be a partner that is not a positive influence. You may have issues around paying the utility bills. One of the questions that may come up is, when your baby needs Tylenol and you don't have any money, how do you get Tylenol? So it can be, when you're in poverty, it can be that kind of immediate. I just need medicine for my baby. So it is a challenge sometimes, and sometimes you don't move forward. You stay right there. As I said, it's up to the woman being coached to set the agenda, not for us to tell her, oh, you should be looking at this grand, path that you are on. It's to help her through whatever point she is in this process, to help her see her way through that, support her as she makes her own decisions, and then to ask good questions to help her move forward.
Great. Let me ask you a technical question. How is coaching different than mentoring?
This is my kind of definitional to it. Mentoring tends to be more directive. Mentoring implies, and if you go back to the origination of that word, the mentor, was a teacher. Someone, I am here to teach you, to help in a most positive way. It's not a negative. But there is less of the sense that you and I are peers, and we're all working on stuff. I'm working on my stuff, you're working on your stuff. I may have had some experiences that I can share with you that might help you with your stuff a little bit, and guess what? You're going to help me understand my stuff too.
Right.
I think one of the wonderful things about this, when I went back to grad school post 60, my age, not the year, post 60, and part of the research that, as I completed my program, demonstrates that the coach grows as much as the person being coached. Seems phenomenal, but it's true. Every interaction you learn, you get something out of it. And one of the benefits that I see about pairing particularly women with someone who's living in poverty is you're going to understand poverty in a way you've never understood it before. A lot of people who are in a stable economic situation tend to think they understand poverty and what people ought to do. That they've got, of course, this is what you need to do. They are now experiencing those issues, like, what do I do when I don't have enough Tylenol? How many loads of wash does a mom have to do with 3 children under 5? She has no laundromat except down the street, so there's no laundry in her house. She and those children have to get to that laundromat, and oh, by the way, she doesn't have a car, so she can only carry so many loads of laundry along with entertaining 3 kids. And add this to the picture, unlike some women who have a washer and dryer in their house, they throw the wash in the washer and then they go and do other things for the next 45 minutes. Unlike someone who has to sit in a laundromat with 3 little children waiting for those washers to stop. Plus you have to have enough money to put in them and soap. You just think about the practicalities of that life and how different it is than a lot of other women's life.
It's remarkable.
It is. And I think that we can help people understand the issues of poverty, the challenges that people face in an entirely different way when you're standing side by side with someone whose story you know. You know her story now.
That's right. Well, now let me ask you a question. These coaches sound like wonderful people. How do you select them, train them, keep track of them?
Yeah, good question. Well, the first step is just kind of the large recruitment process. And I have been so impressed by the number of women that have just said, sure, I can do an hour a week. Yeah, I'm glad to do that for the next year. We have women who have recently graduated from college and still trying to figure out what's next for them. We have moms with little children who are also working who volunteer. We have stay-at-home moms. We have moms who are mid-career. We have single women who are mid-career. We have people who are retired. It has been this full continuum of women that have volunteered. So the starting point is just getting the word out and asking for people to become a part of the program. The second part is we do have to do screening. We have to screen against, the sheriff's list and any other kinds of legal issues that someone might have that you would typically go through for a volunteer program. So we go through that piece. But the next step is with a thought towards how are we going to match you with a woman who needs to be coached? How are we going to make that take place? So part of it is that we have them go through some assessments. The one that we have been using most often is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI. We have the coaches go through that. We also have the people who are applying to be coached. So we get a little bit of information about both.
And what do you find about the compatibility of those scores?
Well, what I think is most important is that the coach is trained about what those styles mean. And so it's not like, we always want 2 extroverts together, or we want, a feeling and a thinking person put together. No, it's more empowering the coach with information that says, this is how you typically approach these things, how you communicate, gather data, how you make decisions, how you communicate those decisions back out. So here's information about yourself. We've empowered you with that. Here's how the person you're going to be working with goes about that same process. So when we have paired someone who has a very different style than yours, that can be just fine as long as you understand that's what it is. That's how that woman approaches things. We also have another great tool that was developed here locally by our CAP program, our Community Action Program.
I don't know that.
It's a federal designation that took place many decades ago, and at one point there was a CAP program in every geographic area in the entire country, and I'm frankly not quite sure if that still is true. But there is a really vibrant one here that's called Chautauqua Opportunities, and they have developed what they call a family matrix, and it is a way of assessing across, believe it or not, 49 different categories, whether someone is in crisis, whether they're stable, or whether they're thriving. And one of the issues that we have to think about for our volunteers, we are not trained professionals, so if someone is in the midst of a mental health crisis and it's not being treated or supported correctly, we're not the ones to solve that problem.
Right.
These are people, the women who are in the crisis category really still need to have professional support. Where we're targeting are those people who are moving towards stable. And what we know about particularly people in poverty, they tend to dip in and out of crisis, they dip in and out of poverty, and we want to be there as they make those dips. And we want to help them think about how to thrive in each of those categories. So some of that might have to do with their occupational skills. Some might have to do with housing, for example. And are they in a stable housing circumstance? And is this a long-term, is this going to work for them over the next year? So across all of these categories, we attempt to help move them towards at least stability, and in those cases we can to a point of thriving.
Right, right. Now, it sounds like you make some immense headway. Can you tell me about any plans you may have or thoughts about expanding the program to other areas?
Yeah. Well, one thing we've been able to work on over the last couple of months, and we are not at the final stage yet, but it's to put our curriculum that we use to train our coaches together into a document. We've been through many cycles of training now over the last 3.5 years, and each one has been a little different, and sometimes that's because we've had different trainers, sometimes that's because we've had a different population being trained. So we are consolidating that training manual, and one of the things that I hope that we can do over the next year is to start sharing that material with other organizations. If I were to have my dream, in Chautauqua County, when we began this program, we had more than 2,000 women living in poverty as heading a household. So there are children as well as herself living in poverty. Not all of those women are appropriate for this program because of the crisis involvement and other things that might be in the way, but let's say there are 1,000 of them. That would be my dream, that we find other organizations that'll work with us, and every woman who wanted a coach who is living in poverty in Chautauqua County could have a coach.
Goodness.
And the other part would be at SUNY Fredonia and the Jamestown Community College. Any woman who had been identified by staff or have self-selected, and we have a lot of women up there that have said, yes, I want a coach. Every one of them, that we could provide them a trained coach. So my first goal would be, let's take this to scale in Chautauqua County and let's do a good job of it. Mm-hmm. But then my other dream is, let's start handing this out. Let's give it to other communities. We did this with no money. This does not take some huge grant from anybody.
Right.
What it takes is women wanting to come together to help another woman. And if the response is anything like this county, there are women all over this country that are willing to reach out and say, yeah, I'm going to put a year into someone else's life, and then maybe it'll be another year and another year, but at least I'm going to start out with a year. So those would be my first goals.
Jane, we're out of time. The staff always indulges me when I go over like this.
Do they?
I've got one question, one point I want to make certain.
Okay.
What's the government involvement?
0.
So this is pure
Total volunteer.
Volunteer hours.
And if anything, we have been, we've made sure that everybody knows we are not part of a government entity. We wanted to be exempt from that. We didn't want someone who had had a bad experience somewhere else to think we're a part of that system. We're totally outside of that. Zero money, zero involvement in the planning, zero participation.
That's terrific. We needed to have this discussion a few years hence, and this has been great fun.
Good.
Please do come back. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
See
Thank
you
you
now.
for asking me, John.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, mine
My
too.
pleasure.